Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the story of an empire. But, not your typical empire built on land, or borders, or even massive armies. We're talking about an empire built entirely on paper, and more importantly, on trust. We are going to look at the absolute, incredible global dominance of the US dollar. We'll trace its rise, dissect how it actually maintains its iron grip on the global economy today, and, maybe most interestingly, explore what might eventually dethrone it.
It's kind of crazy when you really stop and think about it, isn't it? Why on earth does a simple piece of paper rule the world? But think about the real-world impact here. When a Nigerian importer buys electronics from China, they're often paying in dollars. When a Ghanaian student goes to study abroad, they calculate their tuition in dollars. When an entrepreneur in Nairobi or an investor in Kenya is looking to protect their wealth, they look to the dollar. It is literally the invisible thread connecting all of global commerce. But to really grasp how it got this unbelievable power, we first have to understand the exact job it was hired to do.
And that brings us to the core definition. So what exactly is a reserve currency? Well, basically, it's a massive financial safety net for nations. Just like how you or I might keep a rainy day savings account, countries hold huge reserves of foreign currency. They use these funds to pay off international debts, step in to stabilize their own local currencies during an economic shock, and buy really vital foreign goods. And, right now, the US dollar is the undisputed king of these reserves.
But listen, the dollar is really just the newest chapter in an incredibly long story. If we strip away all the complex financial jargon and look at money at its core, we see this huge evolution. We go from trading fish for grain in a basic barter system, to using cowrie shells, to mining precious gold and silver, all the way up to paper notes, and now, just numbers on a digital screen. And at every single stage of this timeline, the actual physical mechanism didn't matter nearly as much as the underlying foundation, which is trust. Money only works because we all collectively agree that it works.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. Before the dollar. The age of gold and the British pound. So before the greenback came along, there were absolutely other rulers of finance. And there's a golden rule you've got to remember here. Financial power always follows economic power. A currency doesn't just accidentally become dominant, right? It takes the throne because the country behind it is an absolute economic powerhouse. For centuries, gold was the universal language of wealth simply because it was scarce, durable, and everyone trusted it. This eventually evolved into the gold standard, where your paper money was essentially a direct claim on actual physical gold. And sitting right on top of that system was the British pound. Powered by the unmatched commercial and industrial might of the British Empire, the pound was the lifeblood of global trade. London was essentially the 19th century equivalent of what New York is today. If you wanted access to global capital back then, you went to London, and you definitely used the pound.
Moving right along to Section 2, How the Dollar Won, World War II and the Bretton Woods Conference.
So how exactly did the crown pass to the United States? Well, it required a massive, seismic shift in the global order. By the mid-20th century, World War II had completely devastated European and Asian infrastructure. Factories were bombed out, and whole economies were just crushed under mountains of debt. But the United States, they experienced relatively little physical destruction on their own soil. Instead, their factories absolutely ramped up, supplying the Allies and emerging as the undisputed arsenal of democracy. With the war winding down in 1944, actually right before it even officially ended, leaders from 44 different nations gathered in this little town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. They knew they had to rebuild the global economy, and they desperately needed a stable financial system to make it happen. And because the US held massive gold reserves and had a booming, intact economy, they were the natural leader.
The absolute genius of the Bretton Woods Agreement was that it created a complete paradigm shift. Think about it. In the old world, countries tied their money directly to gold. In the new world, to promote stability, other nations pegged their currencies to the US dollar instead. And in return, the US promised to peg the dollar to gold at exactly $35 an ounce. This was it. This was the exact moment the dollar was officially crowned and became the ultimate anchor of global trade.
But, a system like that, it really couldn't last forever. Fast forward to the late 60s and early 70s, the US was spending heavily, effectively printing more dollars than they had actual gold to back them up. Foreign nations started getting pretty nervous, and they began asking for their gold back. So in 1971, President Nixon made a huge, historic move. He completely severed the tie between the dollar and gold, just cut it completely. The entire financial world basically held its breath. Without gold backing it up, surely the dollar was going to collapse, right?
Let's find out in Section 3 why the dollar rules, surviving without gold.
So how on earth did a simple piece of fiat paper, completely disconnected from any precious metal, survive the massive shock of 1971 and stay on top? The answer is that the dollar had organically grown larger than the very system that created it. Modern fiat currency derives its value from economic strength, not a shiny piece of metal, and the dollar survived because of four massive pillars. First, just the sheer incredible size and industrial output of the U.S. economy. Second, deep, highly liquid financial markets where investors could safely park billions of dollars. Third, U.S. Treasury bonds, which had essentially become the ultimate safe haven asset for foreign central banks. And fourth, the petrodollar system. Oil became globally priced in dollars. That meant if any country needed energy, they absolutely needed dollars to buy it.
But if we boil it all down, the absolutely crucial point here is the network effect. Think of the dollar kind of like a dominant social media app. Why do you use it? Mostly because all your friends are already on it, right? Why do banks, massive businesses, and governments all around the world use the dollar? Simply because everyone else already does. It just makes international business so much easier. Breaking a network effect of this magnitude is incredibly difficult.
Let's move on and see how this builds in Section 4, the digital future challengers to the throne.
Now, difficult definitely does not mean impossible. As we enter a totally new era, the borders of the global financial system are shifting, and modern rebellions are starting to challenge the dollar's absolute dominance. So we really have to ask the big question. Could the dollar actually lose its position? Look, history has already taught us that no financial empire lasts forever. The Dutch guilder fell, the British pound fell, economic power shifts, and currency power always follows. So while the dollar's demise certainly isn't happening overnight, the landscape is definitely changing right beneath our feet.
So, let's look at the actual facts on the ground regarding the modern threats to the dollar. First, we're seeing China's rising economic influence actively pushing the yuan into more international settlements. Second, we're seeing countries forming regional trade agreements that are specifically designed to bypass the dollar entirely, just to reduce their dependency. Domestically, you've got economists pointing to growing U.S. government debt and occasional spikes in inflation as potential threats to long-term trust. And finally, there's the massive, rapid rise of decentralized finance and cryptocurrencies, which propose a completely different, non-governmental model of money altogether. We're essentially getting a front-row seat to watch these massive macroeconomic forces play out in real time.
Plus, the literal technology of money is shifting. Central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, and stablecoins are actively bridging the gap between traditional fiat money and the blockchain. For tech-savvy folks, say a crypto trader in Abuja or a software developer in Lagos, these digital transformations are completely reshaping the financial battlefield. They offer lightning speed, totally borderless transfers, and entirely new ways to store value that completely bypass the traditional dollar-clearing banking system. It's a real game changer.
But as we look at all these incredible changes, one truth absolutely remains. Whether money is a physical gold coin you can hold, a piece of paper backed by a superpower, or complex code living on a decentralized blockchain, it all runs on one single, invisible fuel: trust. As the saying goes, currencies may change, technologies may evolve, markets may rise and fall, but trust remains the most valuable asset in the global financial system. The future reserve currency, whatever it ultimately ends up being, will always be the one that commands the most global trust.
Which kind of leaves us with one massive final question. As these huge geopolitical plates shift, as global economic power moves, and as digital innovation accelerates faster than ever before, what will the future of your wallet actually look like? How are these macroeconomic forces going to ultimately shape your personal purchasing power in the years to come? It's something every single focused learner needs to keep a very close eye on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the systems that run our world.